Take a look at the modern map of the Iberian Peninsula. You have Spain, a country with a massive territorial footprint, sharing its only land border with a narrow coastal strip to the west, Portugal. Centuries ago, Spain was a global superpower. Its reach extended deep into the New World and across Asia, protected by some of the most formidable armies and navies the world had ever seen. This raises a question of geography. How did a smaller neighbor, cornered against the Atlantic, avoid being absorbed by an empire capable of conquering entire continents? The answer starts with a reset of the peninsula's political board. In the year 711, a Muslim force under General Tariq ibn Ziyad landed at Gibraltar, initiating a conquest that would eventually bring most of the region under Islamic rule. This conquest created an asynchronous timeline of development. Geography wasn't the deciding factor in Portugal's survival. Instead, the nation survived because its timeline of statehood moved much faster than its larger neighbors. While the rest of the peninsula was still fractured, the Kingdom of Portugal emerged as a distinct political project as early as 1128, following a decisive battle led by Afonso Henriques. This new kingdom wasn't just a local claim, it gained formal international legitimacy in 1179, when its independence was officially recognized by the Pope. From there, Portugal moved quickly. By 1249, they had pushed their portion of the Reconquista all the way to the southern coast, effectively locking in their final European borders. To put that in perspective, Spain, as we know it, didn't exist yet. The crowns of Castile and Aragon didn't unite until 1479, and they wouldn't finish their own southern reconquest for another 13 years. That gave Portugal a 243-year head start to build a national identity. There was a moment where these two paths almost merged during the War of the Castilian Succession. Had the Portuguese-backed claimant, Joanna, won the throne instead of Isabella, Portugal and Castile would have likely formed a single union. But Isabella's victory ensured that by the time Spain was unified and powerful enough to look west, Portuguese borders and sovereign institutions were already deeply entrenched. Following 1492, the focus of both nations shifted almost overnight. Christopher Columbus's voyages opened the door to the New World, and suddenly the Iberian border became a secondary concern. In 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas effectively divided the globe between the two powers. For Portugal, this secured their claim to Brazil, a colony that would eventually provide a massive influx of wealth and resources. From an economic standpoint, a land war at home made little sense. The potential gold and trade goods from Asia and the Americas offered a much higher return on investment than a grueling invasion of a neighboring European state. That invasion would have been difficult anyway. The Portuguese border is defined by hilly, rugged terrain and deep valleys, making any ground advance a slow and costly military prospect. Ultimately, the shared obsession with global empires served as a buffer. The wealth of the colonies provided a lucrative distraction that kept both nations looking toward the ocean rather than at each other. This balance was shattered in 1578, when King Sebastian of Portugal died in battle without an heir. The resulting succession crisis left the Portuguese throne vulnerable to outside claims. Spain's Philip II took advantage of the power vacuum. In 1581, he was crowned King of Portugal, initiating the 60-year period known as the Iberian Union. This was a personal union, meaning the two crowns were held by one man, but the two states remained legally and economically separate. Portugal was not annexed, it was simply being managed by the Spanish monarch. However, the union was a period of decline for the Portuguese. Their empire was targeted by Spain's enemies, and internal friction grew as the Portuguese felt their interests were being ignored by the crown in Madrid. In 1640, that tension finally snapped. The Portuguese Restoration War began, successfully breaking the union and re-establishing a native Portuguese dynasty under the House of Braganza. The failure of this union demonstrated that even under a shared king, Portugal's distinct institutional identity was already too established to be absorbed into a greater Spanish kingdom. By the turn of the 19th century, Portugal faced a new era of existential threats. In 1801, Spanish forces influenced by Napoleonic France invaded in the War of the Oranges, highlighting the constant pressure on the mainland. To counter these threats, Portugal leaned on its most effective defensive tool, a long-standing strategic alliance with Great Britain. This alliance was pushed to the limit during the Peninsular War in 1807. A combined French and Spanish invasion was so successful that the Portuguese royal family had to flee to Brazil to avoid capture. But the British military alliance proved decisive. With British support, the Portuguese were able to eventually expel the French forces by 1813 and regain control of their home territory. Portugal's survival during this period shows that when a small state is outmatched militarily, its best defense is often a well-maintained geopolitical insurance policy with a larger ally. Even in the 20th century, the idea of absorbing Portugal persisted in Spanish military and political circles, including plans for invasion discussed during the Spanish Civil War. Despite these lingering designs, the foundations of the Portuguese state, laid nearly 1,000 years ago, remained too stable for a modern conquest to succeed. Portugal survived by securing its borders early, focusing its wealth on distant colonies, and maintaining a constant diplomatic tie to British naval power. The static borders on the modern map are the final result of this history, where early statehood and strategic alliances combined to keep the Iberian Peninsula divided.